ਡਾਕਟਰ ਅਲੀ ਕਨਾਨੀ ਆਰਥੋਡੋਂਟਿਕਸ ਦੇ ਸਰਟੀਫਾਈਡ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲਿਸਟ ਹਨ ਜੋ ਹਰ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀਆਂ ਦੰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਨੂੰ ਸੋਲਵ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਆਰਥੋਕੈਡ IQ ਦੇ ਕੰਪਿਊਟਰ ਗਾਈਡਡ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਟੀਮਲ ਬ੍ਰੈਕਟ ਪਲੇਸਮੈਂਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਮਿਨੀ ਸਟੇਨਲੈਸ ਸਟੀਲ ਬ੍ਰੇਸਿਸ, ਗੋਲਡ ਬ੍ਰੇਸਿਸ, ਕਲੀਅਰ ਬ੍ਰੇਸਿਸ ਤੇ ਇਨਵਿਸਲਾਈਨ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਵੀ ਉਪਲਬਧ ਹੈ। ਜੇਕਰ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਖਾਣਾ ਚਬਾਉਣ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਿਲ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ, ਸਪੀਚ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਜਾਂ ਐਬਨੋਰਮਲ ਬਾਈਟਸ ਹਨ ਤਾਂ ਪਹੁੰਚੋ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਅਲੀ ਕਨਾਨੀ ਕੋਲ। ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟਿੰਗ ਬਿਊਟੀਫੁਲ ਸਮਾਈਲਸ, ਇਲਾਜ ਕਰਾਓ ਤੇ 에ਅਰ ਮਾਈਲਸ ਵੀ ਪਾਓ।
ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ ਜੀ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਫਿਰ ਆਪ ਸਭ ਦਾ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਵਿੱਚ। ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਹਫ਼ਤਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਂਝ ਪਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਸਪਿਰਿਚੁਅਲ ਇੰਟੈਗ੍ਰਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਲੱਭਣਾ ਹੈ। ਇਸੇ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੈਲੀ ਮੌਨਜਾਜ਼ੇਬ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਮਾਸਟਰ ਫੈਸਿਲੀਟੇਟਰ ਹਨ, ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਕੇ ਸਾਂਝ ਪਾਇਆ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਪਿਛਲੇ ਹਫ਼ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਮਹੱਤਵਪੂਰਨ ਵਿਸ਼ੇ 'ਤੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਸੈਕਸ਼ੂਅਲ ਫੈਂਟਸੀਜ਼ ਅਤੇ ਸੈਕਸ਼ੂਅਲ ਅਲਾਈਨਮੈਂਟ ਨਾ ਹੋਣੀ ਸਪਿਰਿਚੁਅਲਿਟੀ ਨਾਲ, ਉਸ ਕਾਰਨ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਸਮੱਸਿਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਜੀਵਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਟੁੱਟਦੇ ਪਏ ਨੇ। ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੂੜ ਸਾਡੇ ਦਿਮਾਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਕੱਠਾ ਹੋ ਚੁੱਕਿਆ ਹੈ, ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੂੜ ਜੋ ਹੈ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਕੱਠਾ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਪਰ ਇਹ ਕਲਟਰ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਡੀ-ਕਲਟਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ, ਇਸ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕੈਲੀ ਨਾਲ। ਜੀ ਆਨੰਦ ਜੀ, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Harpreet.
So again, you have started understanding a little bit of Punjabi now. Ji Anand, welcome to the program. Okay. So Kelly, last week what we talked about was we received lots of calls on that particular topic, and that's what it is. People feel that there is some misalignment and we need to align ourselves with our spirit, and that's how we can lead a blissful and joyful life. So now that clutter which we have accumulated in our lives, there are many reasons which come from other places. So if you can take us on this journey today, how to declutter our minds, how to declutter our life of unnecessary things, of that garbage which is hampering our physical as well as social as well as spiritual development.
Yes. Well, it's a good analogy. You know, I don't know if you've ever seen any of those programs where people really have way too many things in their house, you know, and it becomes a complete barrier for living a full life.
Right.
And in the same way, when we have spiritual clutter, you know, when we're carrying shame and guilt and secrecy and you know, we're in a pattern perhaps. We've got caught up in it, you know, of dishonesty. This is all spiritual clutter that, you know, it blocks our ability to give and receive love, which is really one of the most important things that we do in this lifetime. And it blocks our ability to connect with one another because you know, women talk a lot about intimacy, you know, how they want intimacy, and I think men do too.
Right.
And if you break the word down, it's kind of a funny expression, but into me see, right? So it's really about seeing the other person.
Right.
And if you don't want to be seen, then it's pretty much impossible to have that intimacy and connection.
Right.
So as we clear the spiritual clutter, as we align ourselves, as we bring ourselves to account and start to feel better about ourselves,
Right.
then that capacity for connection with each other increases.
Right.
And that's where we experience the connection and the harmony that we all long for in our relationships.
That's again a very important analogy which you talked about, that decluttering our homes. But we keep on bringing things even if we don't require them, and we keep them, and ultimately a day comes when time have passed, those things have expired, and still we have kept it, and then we realize, oh, what did I do? I need to throw it away. So similarly with the thoughts also, because thoughts are the foundation from which everything starts.
Absolutely.
Now what you are seeing with your experience in the society, what kind of thoughts are prevalent and how that spiritual integrity what we are talking about gets misaligned?
Well, that is where it starts. And there's a concept of cross-wiring that I'd like to talk about. So as we're growing up, and we're dealing with sexuality, and because we all live in the day that we live, which we talked about, which is very materially oriented, that we become cross-wired in our sexuality. So we attach things to sex that don't belong there.
Right.
So all that belongs there, its ultimate purpose, as we've talked about, is procreation, and also to bond the couple into a couple. Again, it's the one unique relationship that we have, and the reality is it does bond us. You know, that physical connection brings a closeness that you can't find anywhere else. So it's unique, and that's its purpose, is to maintain that bond. So anything else is, we can consider it being misaligned, or we
Right.
can consider it as
not in tune
not
with.
in tune.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So, for example, I think it's a myth. You know, this is one of the many myths, and this is what I talk about in some of my programming and workshops that I do. Is we
Right.
go over what are the myths that we've all bought into.
Right.
You know, one of them is sexual fantasy. Okay, if again just step back and you say, is it required for connection with your spouse? No,
Right.
it's not. So it's a way that we have become. You know, it's become, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but it's part of the clutter
Right.
that really doesn't belong there. Same with, you know, a woman dressing in a certain way. We
Right.
think that that's necessary in order to feel sexually fulfilled.
Right.
But if we step back and we say, okay, its purpose is procreation, and this, you know, is it necessary? No. So that means we've become cross-wired. We've taken on something that really doesn't belong there and is not necessary.
Right, and also
this
take
is-
out that glamour which has been attached to it,
Yes,
basically. And what we are finding that glamorization of particular things also creates clutters people's minds,
Yeah.
and they come out of that, don't stay in reality and come out in those figment of imaginations about,
Yeah.
like you mentioned about,
Absolutely.
you know, the girl has to be of this particular kind,
Right.
and sexual fantasies and addictions and all those kind of things come.
Yeah, well, that's what the addiction is,
Right.
right? Is that attachment to something. So our attachment to, you know, the other thing is that the energy that's out there is addictive energy.
Right.
And that's what we think is normal because it's so prevalent. But that's the thing. We have to realize that it's not the normal way to live.
Right.
This is it's misaligned, and it's there's a word I'm trying to think of, a distortion.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to think
Okay.
of. Okay, it's a distortion
Right.
of the true nature of who we are. So because it's so prevalent, we've bought into it as truth. Okay, so addictive energy is very intense.
Right.
It's the lustful energy.
Right.
Okay, and there's a difference between experience a lustful energy and a natural, harmonious sexual energy between the person that you're intended to be directed towards, your
Right.
spouse.
Right.
Okay, that is a very different energy than what's out there, and we need to discover it in ourselves to
Right.
say, am I caught up? You know, am I caught up in this addictive energy? And if I am, then I need to start letting go of some of these attitudes
Right.
that I've, you know, received from the culture around me, and
Now-
start to purify. It's like a simplification. I want
Right.
to simplify.
But we, rather than simplifying things, make it more complicated, and the kind of lenses which the society is now wearing are distorting everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And exactly that harmonious relationships, harmonious existence is being sidelined. Now let's talk a little bit about the time we are living in right
Yeah.
now. It's a great time whereby technologically we are advancing at such a pace which we have never ever seen in the past.
Yep.
But otherwise also there has been some spiritual awakening also. There has been some awakening in other fronts also. It's both ways it's going.
It
So with again your experience working with the people, what are you finding out that as we are basically all are human beings and spiritual beings, are we trying to connect back to that spirit?
I believe so. I think that we're living in a time very unique in history,
Right.
where we're recognizing the oneness of humanity. And you can see that there is this awakening in people. People are thirsting
Right.
for spiritual connection. And that's why I love this concept of virtues,
Right.
because no matter what path you follow, spiritual path you follow, these virtues are at the essence of all of them.
Right.
And it's something we can all look towards
Right.
to align ourselves, because it's always the right direction
Right.
if we align ourselves with honesty
Right.
and integrity, you know, doing what we say, you
Right.
know, living the way we say we believe, you know, that's integrity.
Right.
So the more we do that, you know, we always know we're moving in the right direction. I think the epidemic of addiction
Right.
in our society is an opportunity for us to heal.
Okay.
It's an invitation,
Right.
because the pain is too much. You know, we're in too much pain.
Right.
The abuse and the addictive culture that we've been caught up in, we're just in so much pain. So, you know, many people are taking up that invitation and saying, yeah, I want to do something differently. I'm going to let go of what I've learned. I'm going to let go or do my best at least. I mean, that's the hardest thing. You know, we don't let go very easily as human beings, right? We hold on. But really, we're living in a day that we need to redefine things. We need to come up with new definitions of women in relationship with men. And, you know, part of that is how we communicate with one another. Part of that is how we, it's a big part actually. You know, communication is a very important subject
no doubt about
in
it.
relationship.
Well, that's a very important point. You talked about communication, but the question that arises is right now, you know, spirit or your soul yearns for integrity. It talks about spirituality, but material comforts, which now we are striving for, ultimately give us problems, we know. But still we are running to that. But as you talked about the men and the women, there was a point, if we see in history, you know, men and women were living for long periods of time together. But now what is happening is, don't you feel that a woman also, that because she's earning also, she's working at home also, and she's wearing various other clothes on her, you know, life, you know, hats are different. And that ego is a stumbling block apart from the addictions also, which take you away from that spiritual alignment.
Yes. Yeah. Again, this is our nature, right? That we have our self, our lower self. I consider the ego, you know, like the part of our lower self where we get prideful, you know, and we follow our own path instead of a divine path. But yes, these are all issues. Like I said earlier, this issue of the role of women has changed so dramatically. Women are earning money for the first time, but you know, women and men, the relationship between a man and a woman is like a bird, you know, and both wings need to be strong.
That's right.
In order for that bird to take flight. And we're still imbalanced, Harpreet. We have not yet come to a level of harmony where women are you know, embracing their capacities and their abilities in society and how they can influence the culture. And you know, and on that point, I think that women have a very important role to play, actually, in finding a new balance. And men, you know, need to make space for women to articulate their point of views, and women need to make space for men to, as we work through this together, you know. But as you say, it's very true. You know, we're struggling with ourselves and we're struggling societally.
Spirituality talks about contentment. Spirituality talks about acceptance. Spirituality talks about harmonious living. But in this age of materialism, where there is a, you know, always a want for more and more. Well, there's an English saying which says that there's enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. Now that concept, that shift in our thinking, which is taking us to materialism, and as we have discussed in the previous programs also, that yearning for more and more is creating problems. Those addictions are because of those things. So what do you find over the years with your, again, experience with the communities? What are you finding that how is this materialism impacting us, and what are you seeing for the future also? Well,
I think the addictions, again, the addiction is the attachment to the material world. So we need material things. So to have a nice home and to have comforts is not a bad thing in and of itself. It's the attachment and the importance we place on it and putting away our spiritual life. That's the problem. Right?
So there should be a balance.
Not only a balance, but the spiritual life should be more important. It should be more important that we align ourselves. And, you know, in the most honest way, proceed with our livelihood and our living and provide for our family and, you know, use our strengths and the gifts we've been given to work out in the world and contribute to,
so
to
the
hunger, benefit.
So the hunger should be for spiritual connection, not for material comforts only. And we'll talk, sorry for, I would like to interrupt you here, go for a break, come back and talk about this, how to, you know, that hunger, develop that hunger for more of spiritual connections. We'll discuss after this break. ਸੋ ਹੁਣ ਤੱਕ ਜੋ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਈ ਜੀ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਐਡਿਕਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈਗੀ, ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕੈਲੀ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਹੋ ਕੀ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਚੀਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਐਕਸੈਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸਪਿਰਿਚੁਅਲ ਕਨੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਟੁੱਟਦੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਪਣਾ ਮੂਲ ਆਧਾਰ ਜੋ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਹੀ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਜਿਸ ਕਾਰਨ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਚਿੰਤਤ ਹਾਂ। ਕਲਟਰ ਕਰੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਸੋਚ ਨੂੰ, ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਆਪਣੇ ਦਿਮਾਗ ਨੂੰ, ਆਪਣੇ ਸਰੀਰ ਨੂੰ, ਹਰ ਉਸ ਗਲਤ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਸ ਦਾ ਅੰਜਾਮ ਜੋ ਹੈ ਬੜਾ ਮਾੜਾ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਸਾਡੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਰਿਜ਼ਲਟਸ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਇਸ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਡੀਕਲਟਰਿੰਗ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਕਸੈਸਫੁਲ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ।